Welcome everybody. This is the first in our Helen in Conversation series. This Helen in Conversation episode is the first one, and therefore we're going to start at the beginning. And this is about the story of how Good Things Foundation even came into being. So Helen, where did it start? How did you start it?
Something I like to talk about is basically when Tony Blair got his new job in 1997, I got a new job. So that's early May 1997. And the reason for that is that I was working at the University of Sunderland, and we were doing some work with the think tank IPPR, with Gordon Brown and others in the Labour Party in opposition, getting ready to govern. And they had this big idea called University for Industry. And then at the University of Sunderland in the northeast of England, we were asked by IPPR and the Labour Party to set up a pilot for University of Industry. And I was selected to run that pilot, to be the director for the pilot, if the Labour Party won. So literally, on that day in May, when Tony Blair got his new job, I got my new job. And that is the origin story for all of this. So I did that, and then I went on to help set up Learn Direct, which became the brand name for University of Industry. But at the same time, within the Labour Party manifesto, they had something called the Capital Modernisation Fund, which was to set up a network of ICT learning centres, I think was what it was called back then, because only a third of people had the internet at home back then. And so the idea was, and it was quite visionary, if you like, for the Labour Party to see that this was going to be a big deal and that people needed to know about the internet. And so the vision was that every corner, every street corner should have a place where people could go to access the internet. And that was set up by the Department for, I think it was called Education and Skills back then. They've had lots of names over the last couple of decades. And they set up this network of ICT learning centres, and they spent £250 million doing it, which was pretty amazing. And that didn't include libraries, because the libraries also had something called People's Network at that time as well. And so this was this massive investment in because there's also computers were a minimum of £1,000, and obviously 20 years ago £1,000 was a lot. So it was an expensive endeavour. And then in that period of time, whilst it was still run by the government, the government, so this is the new exciting Blair Brown government, also set up what we now know of as digital government services, and they called that UK Online. So it's probably beginning to use words that are familiar to some of you. And so UK Online was the portal for e-government services. They had UK Online for Business, and this network got rebranded the UK Online Centre Network. And so there were around 3,000 centres, as we called them for a very long time, and some of you can remember us calling them centres, I'm sure. Is that this network of centres, about 3,000, and then once the UK Online Centre brand came along, then another about 3,000 joined that network, just as branded centres. And so this was the UK Online Centre network. And someone called Margaret Bennett, that I'm sure lots of you will remember, was the Deputy Director at the Department for Education and Skills at the time. And once they kind of spent all this money and set up this network, they decided that wasn't what the government should do. The government should give that to somebody else to run. And so Margaret and I, mostly at weekends over a glass of wine, designed a program where that network would be given to us at Learn Direct, because I ran the Learn Direct network, and so therefore those two networks should come together. So that happened in 2003, 2006. I then span that out into an independent business unit within Learn Direct, and then 2010. So obviously 2010, the coalition government came in. 2010, 2011 was something called the Bonfire of the Quangos, where basically the new coalition government decided we don't need a milk board, and we don't need this, and we don't need that. We don't need regional development agencies, and we don't need sector skills councils. All of those things they thought, well, waste of money and bureaucracy. So they got rid of all of those. And the board at UFI Learn Direct decided that they would volunteer to be sold to a private investment company. And this is kind of where the OG story for Good Things Foundation really comes in, because I said, you can't do that to us, because we're not going to be sold to a private equity company. We're a charity. So this is kind of my sort of founder story, because I went to battle, if you like. That there's another section about influencing. I did lots of influencing, like who do I know? Who can I influence to make this not happen? Cabinet Office, senior people at the Cabinet Office was one of them. And then Martha Lane Fox had also been made the Digital Inclusion Champion in 2009. And so I was talking to Martha Lane Fox. Martha Lane Fox had got, I had for about 2 years been influencing, can't say lobbying because we're a charity, but influencing to that we should get £30 million to help 1 million people to learn how to use the internet, because it's all about learning, nothing about access until 2020, boys and girls. So this was all about skills and helping people and support with confidence in communities. So 30 million for 1 million people. Martha persuaded Gordon Brown to give us that in December 2009. And then that was part of this deal. And so obviously I had Martha, I had other officials, I had officials in different departments, I had the Cabinet Office. We had a big, what was probably we all thought in the room was going to be a punch up with the Chief Executive Learn Direct. With the Cabinet Office, wasn't really a punch up. Then the woman at the Cabinet Office took it up to Gordon Brown, and he said, yes, of course, let's put this out to tender. Let's take it out of the prospectus. So it's not going to be sold. We're going to put it out to tender. So in the background, I'd set up a separate entity. I had persuaded Matthew Taylor. I don't know how many people know this. Matthew Taylor, who was at the RSA at the time, to be our chair. And then I had to do loads of influencing to say, like, we have no track record as an organization, but we have track record as people to run this and to do this. And so that was quite a big deal. And I had to do that in Australia as well when we set up Australia, which was about, as a brand new entity, you have zero accounts, you have zero, history, but they're going to give you loads of money to do something. So that was when Good Things Foundation was founded. And obviously it wasn't called Good Things Foundation back then. I think lots of you know that we're on our third name, only our third name now in the 15 years. So we were Online Centres Foundation to start with. Then we had a short period when we were the Tinder Foundation, and now we're the Good Things Foundation. That first entity was Online Centres Foundation, and that tender, we had one contract, which was to finish that, helping 1 million people to get confidence and skills, and that was about £12 million for about, I'm going to say, I think it was maybe like 9 to 18 months. And so we had one contract, which was with the government, which was to finish off this program, which was called Smarter Government. So it was all about helping people to use online services, but it kind of wasn't in the way that you might think about it now. It was much more about that foundational building blocks to be ready to use the internet to interact with government.
I suppose what really drove you in that moment to do that? Because as you say, back then you didn't even have arguments around universal credit. There was no NHS app, a lot of the things we talk about now to say this is so essential. So I'm just really interested in what drove you from the perspective of it as a social issue, and also that thing about actually you were taking quite a big risk here, weren't you?
Yeah, to me the biggest risk was I would fail at spinning it out, right, and being able to create this new entity, and that it would be sucked up into this private equity company and completely ruined and trashed, right? So for me the biggest risk was failure. Clearly the risk was I could be just sacked, which was probably my biggest risk. And obviously, I don't know if many people know, but Milton's been a carer, not a carer, he raised the kids. He was the house husband. So we only had the one income in the family. So in that way, it's also a massive risk that I could be sacked. We would have no money coming into the household. And that was probably I suppose I just never really thought about that. I thought that the biggest risk was failure, that the UK Online Centre network wouldn't have these custodians to look after them, and that it would be would be trashed, and communities wouldn't have the support that they needed. I think so. Back when I was at University of Sunderland, and I mean, you know, we probably don't want to do the whole Helen Milner history, but I started working in the internet in 1986, helping mostly children and schools to learn how to learn what the internet was. This is pre-World Wide Web, okay? So this was like to learn what the internet is. So Rupert Murdoch, News International, and then so. Really, since 1986, although I did not curate this career, it just happened. I just went to the next thing that I thought was interesting, was about informal, non-formal learning where the internet and technology is part of it. And then when I went to University of Sunderland was then, and I'm sure still is, what we kind of thought of like a community university. Like it's very much had lots of students who came from the local area. It had a really big access program to help mostly women returning after they'd had kids to come and do university careers. People coming to university didn't have A-levels. It was very much about giving people that chance, that second chance, that opportunity. And I think that was why I was really interested in UFI Learn Direct, because in the beginning, that's what UFI Learn Direct was supposed to be about. It was about like using technology to give people this second chance. And so what drove me was that actually there's lots of people who miss out on learning and education. And obviously I saw the internet as being this incredible place and space and for opportunity. And if the UK Online Centre Network didn't exist, which was very likely if I failed, that it wouldn't exist, then that would be so bad for those, you know, hundreds of thousands of people who were being supported through that network. So that's what drove me, is that everybody has an opportunity to learn and to succeed and to do well in life, but not everybody gets that first time round, right? They don't all get to go to great schools, and they all don't all get great mentors and that great teacher that puts their spark in their mind. Like, so if we could help people in the communities where they feel safe to have that second chance, that's kind of the way that I always felt about it.
Yeah, yes, that's brilliant. And I think that really actually continues and shines through, doesn't it? That access to opportunity. So although it's different, you know, it's a much wider set of opportunities, it's still that core thing. We're going to be covering lots of different areas over this series, including comms, but because we're in origin mode, the origin of Get Online Week, because that actually happened before you spun it out.
Yeah, I set up the independent business unit, and so Alison is here. Definitely Alison was part of that, and Gabby was part of that, and that it was very much, you know, literally we went into like a different office and a different space, and we, you know, bought nice furniture. And we very much wanted the culture to be different to what we had experienced at Learn Direct, and this is about us owning that and owning our future. And that so that was 2006. So then 2007 I think was the first Get Online Day, and then the following year it was Get Online Week, because the network said that they loved it so much and they couldn't all do it on that day. Like if it could be a week, that would be better. Yeah, so we definitely did that before we spun out. We did that as part of those early days.
And so in terms of thinking about, I realise you've been talking about Sunderland, but our headquarters is in Sheffield.
Yeah. So you know, back in the 1997, post 1997, you know, the new Blair government era, that the, you know, university of industry was a big manifesto commitment, and they were definitely going to do it, and they had a budget for it, and so they actually put out like an expression of interest about where should the university for industry be located. So in Sunderland we put a bid in, and Sheffield put a bid in, Derby I think put a bid in, and we probably no one else really had a chance, because David Blunkett was the Secretary of State at the time for the Department for Education and Skills, and he was a Sheffield MP, and the Department for Education and Skills obviously had a big office here in Sheffield. And so I think it was probably a foregone conclusion that it was going to be based in Sheffield. So it was based in Sheffield. And, me and the family up sticks, and we moved to Sheffield and, came to help set up Learn Direct.
So this is, it's one of those brilliant insights that shows like origin stories, startup spin outs. There's so much actually about individuals. These are individuals making decisions. It's Gordon Brown, it's David Blunkett, it's Helen Milner, it's Margaret Bennett. It's how can we make this happen, and I just always think that's quite an interesting reflection, because we see that across amazing network members and local authorities and others. It's individuals often rather than institutions that are the ones that make the change, but you need a great team around you to really drive that forward.
Definitely. And I think that I think we should talk more about social entrepreneurs, and that's something that I want to do when I'm in retirement. Is that we talk a lot about entrepreneurs, building businesses and unicorns and startups and scale ups, and that all in the private sector. And I just don't think there's enough attention to all of those people who are entrepreneurs, who are, obviously setting up, spinning out, whatever, scaling up social businesses or social enterprises or charities, but also, like you say, people in local authorities who are taking risks, who are seeing the potential, who are pushing it forward, who understand about what's the change they need to happen and how to put the pieces together to make that change happen. And so I think we really should talk about that social entrepreneurship with much more pride and with a much louder voice, because I think that we should be proud, all of you should be proud of, when you're being entrepreneurial and when our partners are being entrepreneurial. And like so many hub managers, like if you think about the ambassador hubs, they're all been set up by these amazing individuals who are incredibly entrepreneurial. We also should be encouraging, young people and other ages of people to see that social entrepreneurship is something that is valued and is exciting and is important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to now ask people to start thinking. Have you got any questions that you want to put to Helen? Anything goes. Do not worry if it might be a question that also might be relevant to a later series. This is the start of the series, so feel free. But as you think about your questions, I want to pull on that thread a little bit, Helen, and say, okay, if you're looking back, you led a pilot, you did a spin out, that and actually millions was involved. Those are big numbers, really big numbers that we're talking about. And this was, you went from a pilot to doing something that was UK level immediately. Do you ever look back and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I actually did that, I pulled it off? Or did you know then where this would likely go?
I'll tell you something that we could bring up in the influencing one, is that I remember thinking, if only I could get to a civil servant, then I could persuade them that they need to change this policy for the country. And then I met the civil servant. I thought, if I could meet the minister, then I could persuade the minister to change something. And then I meet the minister and I realized, if only I could meet like the prime minister, then I could actually persuade the prime minister that they need to change something. And it's like that thing where you keep on going and you say, well, actually, no, that's not enough. That's not good enough. It needs to be bigger. It needs to be, it needs to have that, that you need to find the people who are listening, and you need to make sure that they have the ability to make the change. So obviously that's within a kind of policy and influencing space. But I think though, so actually when I was made an executive director at Learn Direct, so I started as a head, and then about 9 months later I was made the executive director. And one of my colleagues, so the guy who was like the chief financial officer, said to me, well, you've always been so ambitious, Helen. And I kind of went like, what are you talking about? Like, me ambitious? What do you mean? And so I think it's because it was always about the impact that I could have. Like, what skills do I have to make impact, and how can I make impact, and who do I know through which and with whom I can have impact? I hadn't ever thought about that as ambition. It was always about, and also realizing quite early on in my career that the more I guess from a hierarchy point of view, although I'm not terribly hierarchical, by the way, is that, but though having the permission to be able to make change and to do action and to lead people actually makes more of that impact. And so those two things kind of come together. And so it wasn't that I wanted to be a director, I wanted to be a chief exec. I just wanted to be able to have, I'm going to say power, but I don't mean like power hungry, but like to be able to make decisions to make that change happen and to be in the position to, you know, lead great people and to work collaboratively with great people to make that change happen. And actually it was always a bit like, therefore I need that next job. I need to do that next thing, because that next thing will give me more space and more opportunity to have that impact.
Yes, that really resonates. It really comes through in how you lead and how you are. Yes.
Yeah. The bit that you might just want to touch on is obviously the kind of almost a decade between setting up, I'm going to call it Good Things Foundation, and the pandemic. So obviously that period we had a lot of government contracts. We then got Future Digital Inclusion, so that came kind of next. We had to bid for that. Came next after the Smarter Government. Within about 6 months of setting up, I was obviously already out there hungry to get other people to give us money. So, you know, it was very much to say, this is not just government. We got a Lloyd's Bank contract, I think within about 6 months. And during that decade, we've worked with a lot of different government departments, Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service. Some of you who've been around longer will remember some of these things. Obviously, we had a huge program with the NHS. I think it's really important that those of you who were around and who were part of that don't forget that 6 years we had the Widening Digital Participation Program, and we did so much good work, and we had loads of great impact on that. So, you know, we did that with the NHS, which was fantastic. We obviously helped with the census, so that kind of overlapped a little bit with the pandemic, but so helping on the 2021 online census and having those online census places. Google.org, I think, have given us something like $5.5–6 million, and we've had lots of different programs with them. Some of you might have heard of Google Garages. We helped to set up the garages in Sunderland, Portsmouth, and Belfast, and that was a little bit just before the pandemic, because the pandemic we were supposed to set one up in Liverpool. We also that Google had a bus that went round and visited lots of different communities, and we were responsible for where that bus went, who they saw, and obviously we very much plugged that into the network. So we've done so many different and exciting things. I think it's really important that you know, some of that, I mean, it's in lots of your brains. I could see some of you nodding, but some of you are newer to the organization, right? So I think remembering that our reputation is built on all of that as well, you know, that we did that. And it's not an English My Way, right? English My Way built a whole section of the network, and lots of the people in the network who are very strong hubs now kind of came in through English My Way. So that's about helping people learn English language through online tools in partnership with the British Council and the BBC, right? And so Make It Click. So some of you remember Make It Click. So we had a website that was we collated different learning materials, and we had links through to things on YouTube and other learning platforms. So, you know, we really have well, you've all worked here long enough to know that it's never boring at Good Things Foundation. But, you know, over 15 years, that decade I'm talking about up to the pandemic, we did so many different things, and we really grew, actually. And then obviously don't forget setting up Australia in 2016-17, because, you know, we'd kind of done the UK by then, right, Tick? So, you know, so that decade, we mustn't forget that decade, because I think we changed, the pandemic changed so much for us and our model and what we do and our strategy. But that decade we had before, although it was like lots of projects and programs and, you know, we did different things, we did loads of so many amazing, great things that I think it's really important that those of you who are at Good Things, who remembers all of those, like that we'd still talk about it, and we still have it in our like portfolio of our history and our memory about what we can do and the impact that we have had.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those are also, I mean, hopefully some of those will come through the session around the network, because there are some network members who have absolutely been along that journey with us, being involved in a number of those different programs at different times.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's brilliant. One other thing that it might be helpful to cover is the origins of why we're a staff-led mutual, and also thinking about, we know Liz as our chair, but Liz wasn't the first chair of Good Things. So just maybe a little bit about the origins of those more organisationally things.
I'm a founder. I'm setting up this new entity. I am hoping to spin this out. I'm obviously planning for success, not planning to fail. And I thought, well, what kind of organisation do we want to be, right? And I've always thought that we can all do better, right? So we can, like I said, I wanted us to be like a modern not-for-profit. I didn't want us to be like an old-fashioned, like fat charity like Age UK or someone like that, who kind of sends 5 people to every meeting and feels like they're very rich and they waste money. And anyway, I'm sure Age UK now is very different. I'm talking about like back in like 2010, 2011. And I wanted us to be modern and fleet of foot and entrepreneurial, and, you know, and focused on impact and focused on our mission in a way that I didn't think old-fashioned charities were. And also, and Cherry might want to talk about this in the leadership one, is that I've never felt that I've done any of this by myself, right? And that therefore we were going on this journey, and absolutely I'm, you know, the leader, and I took those risks, so we wouldn't be here if I hadn't, but I still had people with me who were doing that, right? And therefore it felt that although I was the one taking the risks and stepping off the cliff, that we were a team, right? And that, and also I guess I didn't want to set up an organization that me and the team that I was kind of leading and who was coming with me and the senior team at that time, to then be told what to do by a bunch of like trustees. But I saw that trustees were important, and they would have like challenge and scrutiny and things like that. And therefore having something that was about a staff-led mutual that had staff on the board, and also having other external trustees, was really important. Our first chair was Jim Knight. No, our first chair was obviously Matthew Taylor, as I said. But when we actually successfully won the tender, he then wanted paying. I think I can probably say that in public. And we didn't want to pay our chair. We didn't think it was right. And so then I approached Jim Knight, Lord Jim Knight, who had been recently ennobled because he'd lost his Labour MP seat. So he became our first chair. So we had Matthew Taylor, then we had Jim Knight, and then we had our first board meeting in March 2012.
That's really helpful to have that. And there are lots of questions now. So one is, Tom has said, what are the origins of the digital inclusion movement as we know it? Because your legacy is bigger than just a CEO of Good Things. You have been a pioneer of a movement. How did that start?
It's pretty funny to think. So in 2003, when I'm going to say Margaret Bennett, because it was basically Margaret Bennett, like gave the UK Online Centre network to me at Learn Direct to run. The contract said our role was to maintain the UK Online Centre network. And I just like laughed and said, hang on a minute, you just want me to maintain it? Like, surely that's definitely not what we're going to do. I think she was being kind to kind of go, well, the minimum is maintain it, and then, you know, do grow it, enhance it, enable it, if you want to. I think that so I guess the reason I'm saying that, I think then there's 2 parts of the question, isn't there? There's the network has been absolutely fundamental for 20 plus years, 25 years. Right. So I think being rooted in communities and having that at scale is almost like the origin of the movement, if you like. And then almost you build on that to say, how can we then influence change that's going to make it better for digitally excluded people, but with that authenticity and knowledge that we do literally go and talk to people in communities who are digitally excluded, right? And so I think, I don't know if that answers your question, Tom, but I think that it's that combination of having that kind of bedrock of the network and then wanting to do more and achieve more for people and communities and excluded people and communities. So, and then it's just like, I've sometimes said that I'm ambitious because I'm ambitious for the impact that we can have by working together and collaborating with other partners, right? And I think that is basically the origin of the movement, is that how do we work both at hyperlocal level and with people at national level to have as big an impact as we can, to make sure that people are not left behind, and going right back to that opportunities question, word that we probably don't talk about enough, that people have the opportunity, the same and equal opportunity that people who are online, who are using the internet, to really benefit their lives and benefit their futures. And so it's kind of just that belief that people want to be part of that. And therefore that's a movement, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I'm going to link a couple of questions. So Lisa has said, Helen, you've talked about the risks, starting up, fear of failure. Did you have a backup plan? Was there a plan B? And I'm going to link that to Hannah's question, which is there anything you'd have done differently?
So Lisa, no, there's no plan B. I mean, plan B was then, get yourself up, dust yourself off and, get another job, right? So, or start something else up. So that, in fact, I do think that is typical of an entrepreneur, like, or a founder, is like, you'll just have to be like 100% focused on like, you are going to be successful and how do you make sure that you are successful? So it's almost like thinking about a plan B maybe makes you fail. I don't know, maybe that's what my psyche's telling me. So for example, the woman at the Cabinet Office, Karen Wheeler, said we had to send something to number 10 to get this approved. And I asked her if she could write it. And she said, no, you have to write it. But I wanted her to write it so my name wasn't on it, although it was clearly came from me. And she said, no, you have to write it. And I knew by writing it and it coming from me with my name on it put me at much greater risk. But that was the only way through that at that moment. But yes, you're 100% right. So as soon as we started and Margaret moved and became our first finance director, then Margaret was definitely part of that, part of that senior team. And I mean, obviously that's about leadership and having a great team, right? It's like you bring different things, and that's what you want to have in a great team, is you don't want everyone to be the same. I mean, God help us, if we're all entrepreneurial, then like we'd probably never achieve anything. And then the regret, I think, I have said in the past that I don't spend a lot of time reflecting on the successes of the past, and I think sometimes that's a bit of a weakness, right? Is I think sometimes stepping back and recognizing that something I've done has gone well or whatever. I don't really do that, and I don't really do it on the regret side either, and that I think is a bit annoying sometimes because I'm quite solutions oriented. And I think sometimes that's quite annoying as a line manager to be solutions oriented. So I think that's the kind of thing. I can't think of the regrets because obviously everything then turned out okay, right?
Yeah. So if not a regret, James has asked a surprise. What has surprised you most along the journey?
I think going back to Tom's question on the movement, I suppose this is slightly different, but is because I was going to be all like super shiny and positive, is like I'm surprised how many people kind of really get it when they really get it, that digital inclusion is really important. And so I think the counter of that is how many people don't get it, right? So I mean, something that is absolutely hilarious is that both our future digital inclusion and our NHS widening digital participation funding from government finished in March 2020.
Yeah.
Right. So that, you know, you could say that now I'm sort of surprised that here we were at the birth of a pandemic, and they thought the best thing to do was to stop funding digital inclusion, right, at that government level. But you know, I think on the flip side of that, the numbers of people who came and, you know, who the pandemic, I mean, obviously we've got to have a session on the pandemic, right, Emma?
Yeah, that's right.
Just how many people then got digital inclusion because it was in the news that kids couldn't do their schoolwork and their homework. And I think that, you know, you could say, I don't know if I'm like fudging the answer to this, but it's like, that was quite surprising when, you know, we've had a really cogent argument and we've done business cases and we've got an economic argument and we've got a social argument, and those things didn't cut through. And then all of a sudden there's a pandemic and kids can't do their homework, and all of a sudden you're all over the BBC Breakfast Show, right? Is that that it was kind of surprising how the pandemic enabled digital inclusion to penetrate through into people's mindsets in a way that we hadn't been able to do that before.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two more questions. So one of them is from Mary, and that is about, is there a project or program that you are most proud of and why? And I'd suggest that let's look at that period of between kind of 2010 to 2020 and think about within that window, is there a project or a program you were most proud about or would most want us to remember?
I think that's hard. I obviously love all my children equally, right? So I definitely think that the kind of google.org, when we did like the Garage is the Bus and Make It Click, and Angela Ellis, that some of you will remember from having covered Cecil's last maternity leave, was absolutely fantastic. Like, she led that team, and it had a really great culture and a really great kind of delivery focus and impact. You know, a widening digital participation. We did these like deep dive pathfinders, which was amazing, and and we had a service design team back then, and they went out and slept on the street with rough sleepers to really learn what that was like. But you know, I think. But I'm proud of other things in other ways, like future digital inclusion, the fact that we, you know, helped 1.25 million people, that it just became part of our DNA. And like, I'm going to say turn handle, forgive me, those of you that worked on it, and maybe it felt a bit more stressful than that. But, you know, it was just something that we set up and we ran it, and it was like, it ran smoothly, and it was, you know, and so I'm super proud of that too, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, it's too difficult to choose anything in particular, and in a different way. And I know this is not from that period, but Data Poverty Lab I also think is really great. Yeah. Right? I think the Data Poverty Lab has kind of created us in a different kind of niche, in a different light, and you know, really shown that by focusing, prioritizing our expertise, we can really shine in a particular like policy area.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Helen. I've been saving a good one, and it is an origins one. And Emma, you asked the question, how did the name Good Things come about? Is there a story there, Helen?
Yeah, so well, first of all, let's just say Tinder Foundation was all about us being a catalyst and a spark. And then obviously it became a bit embarrassing being called the Tinder Foundation after a while. So Tinder, the dating app, didn't exist when we set up Tinder. We chose the name Tinder Foundation. And then we had like a branding agency working with us to try and help us find the next name. And literally every name kind of was either when we did the like reviews, were either like dating organizations or they were evangelical Christian organizations, right? And so because obviously we were oozing all this like bringing people together and inspiring people and connections and communications. And then the brand agency came up with names like Hum, and I can't think of literally like wiped it out of my brain like how bad they were. They were like really bad names. And but we had a tagline, make good things happen. And I think they suggested, well, maybe like when the second time round, after all the shit names they came up with to begin with, they said something like, how about like things happen or something like that, which also is pretty shit, right? And so literally Anna, who was the head of marketing, was leaving, trying to get her train one evening. I went, Anna, what are we going to do about this name? Like the brand agency is like totally shit. What should we do? And she was going, well, things happen. What do you think about things happen? Like, we're going, okay, make good things happen, make good things. Just, okay, that's interesting. And I was like, what about good things? Because I was quite fixated. I wanted the name good. I wanted good in there. Like, we do good, we're, for good. And so what about good things? And she went, yeah, maybe good things, maybe good things. And then there was another colleague who's left, Nat Thorpe was in the office. And so she did a quick Google and she could find, of course, an event. No, it was a fishing charity in the States called Good Things Foundation, and so it didn't look like there was any like dating app about to be emerging or something called Good Things. And so Hannah took the way, okay, not Hannah, Anna took it away and went, oh yeah, okay, let's try Good Things. And so that's how we ended up being Good Things Foundation.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it was quite a good story. And yeah, unfortunately the brand agency was really shit.
Yes, I love that story so much, and I'm so glad we are not called Hum. Quite relieved. Helen, that has been fantastic. Really brilliant start to the series. Huge thank you for sharing the story, the origin story, and really look forward to the next episode in the series.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.